are continuing our certification series in Python. And today we're going to get into ifs and else ifs and all kinds of other good stuff. We're actually going to start sort of working a little bit more applications as opposed to just really quick sort of script kind of things that we've done to this point. And this one we're going to actually, as always, it will be out in the GitHub repository when we're done. I have jumped ahead just a little bit. So what we're looking at is we're going to cover if, we're going to do if else, we're going to do if-elif, if-elif-else. So we've got this little example, and let me do this. So I have a little bit better formatting maybe than we've done so far. So what I'm going to do, and some of these are things we've already seen, so we're going to start building these into and reusing them as we go through some of these applets, basically, that we'll be building out as we go. So this one, we're going to use input that we talked about previously. This will allow us to get input from the console. And we're just going to ask the user to provide an hour of the day. We're going to suggest it's between 1 and 24. And we're not going to put any validation or something. That may come later. But right now, we're going to stick with this. So they're going to enter a number between 1 and 24. Actually, we'll even make it between 0 and 24. It doesn't really matter. And this is some of the things that we can do. We're going to show a little bit of logic around building applications as well. So first we're going to do is we're going to say there's this greeting, and it will be good evening. And, oops, I need to do this. And what we did, well, I just moved this, but essentially we're just going to print out the greeting, and we're going to have little line feeds before it. Now, because of the if, so if we don't do anything, let me switch over here, and let me do this so we can see a little better. So, okay, so provide the hour of the day. Let me do 18. So this will be 6 o'clock in the evening. It's going to say good evening. If I do the same thing and I 6 o'clock in the morning, it still says good evening. So, obviously, perfect example of where we can use some logic. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say if, and then we have to take the value that we get, we have to convert it to an int, because remember, it doesn't like comparing strings and integers. And so we're just going to say if it's less than or equal to 12. So if it's less than noon, we're going to say good morning. So notice that if, it's pretty straightforward. There's no then or anything like that. It's just an if statement right here. And then you're going to have whatever it's checking, and then a colon, and then underneath it is going to be indented. Notice here, I come back out. There's no end if or anything like that. This thing is, because it is left, it's at the same level as the if, it assumes that it's going to be outside of the if. So the if is already completed. If I were to just move this in, so then that means that I'm not going to get the greeting unless the value is less than 12. So we'll look at that real quick. So here, if I go back and I do that value of 18, it just goes to application end. It does not print it. But if I do 6, it does print good morning. So I need to make sure that this part is going to be outside of that if statement. So we've got an if here. Now let me do an if else. So let's say, let's do this. If it's less than, we'll start with evening. So we'll say if it's less than 10, it's going to be, actually, let's just say, well, this one, it doesn't really matter because it's never going to say this. So let's just do this. Let's say good afternoon. And if it's less than 10, then it's going to be, actually, we could do, we'll do it this way. It's going to say good morning. Otherwise, it's going to say good evening. And notice now that if we do in the morning, it says good morning. If we do noon, it's going to say good evening. If we do 10 o'clock at night, which is what, 22, then it still says good evening. We never see good day. Go back here. So what we really want is, let's say if we're going to do afternoon, morning, and evening, then we're going to do an elif. So here we're going to say if it's, let's get rid of this. If it is less than or equal to 10, we're going to say good morning. Else if, so if it's not less than or equal to 10, if it is greater than equal to, let's say 17, so 5 o'clock or later, it's going to say good evening. Otherwise, it's going to say good afternoon. We'll move this around a little bit. So now what we'll see is if we do it early in the morning at 5 a.m., it says good morning. If we do it at 10 a.m., it's still going to say morning because I moved that to 11. But if we do 11, oh, sorry. If we do 11, and it says good morning because it was equal to. But if I do noon, now it's going to say good afternoon, even though it's noon. And then if I do the evening, let me do 7 o'clock at night. Now it says good evening. So an elif, much like an if, underneath it, it's going to be out. Notice it's out at the same indentation level as if. It also, like if, has its, it has whatever it's checking, has its validation, the if part of it, that logic. And then, of course, you have things underneath it here. So this, because this backs out here, that's the end of the if. Whenever I get something back to the else level or elif level, then it's going to be back at that level. So I could say, let's just do this. We're going to do error. And so now we're going to add an else to the end. Oh. And we're going to take that. And this will be good afternoon. Or we'll say good day. So if we do an if-else, if-elif-else, then here, again, notice we're indenting as needed, and then we're outdenting to sort of wrap the, to complete the thought for the ifs and the elifs and the elses. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to say if it's less than or equal to, let's say 10. Okay, so if it's less than that, we're equal to, it's going to be good morning. Else, if it's greater than or equal to 17, it's going to be good evening. And then if there's anything else, we're just going to say good day. So here we're actually overriding greeting no matter what. So if for some reason this bails out completely, we would get an error. So if we go back to, and if we do it at, say, 1 a.m., it's going to say good morning. If we do it at noon, it says good day. If we do it at 6 o'clock, it says good evening. And so now we've put together, we can put together something moderately complicated here. Now, we actually made this one pretty simple because these are mutually exclusive. You can't be less than or equal to 10 and greater than or equal to 17. But we can do this. So we can say if it's less than, let's say if it's less than 10, it's going to say good morning. Else, so let's say if it's less than 17, it's going to say good day. Otherwise, it's going to say good evening. And so now we can actually do multiple elifs. So here we can say if it's equal to 12, let's see, we're going to say it is noon. So note, so here, good day, less than 17, it's not going to get there because it's going to actually be hit here and then essentially bail out. So let's take a look at that. So we've got 10, 12, and let's play with these a little bit. So the first thing we do is we come in, if it's 1 in the morning, it says good morning. Easy enough. If we say 10, then it's good day because it's not less than 10, it's actually equal to 10. If we do noon, it says it's noon because it comes through here and it says if it's less than 10, good morning. Otherwise, if it's equal to 12, it's noon. Otherwise, if it's less than 17, we're going to say good day. So actually, we can go see where, if we use 11, it still says good day because here it's greater than 10. It's not equal to 12, but it's less than 17. This is where order can be very important. If I were to switch this elif, then what's going to happen is it will always handle the if less than 10, then if less than 17. The 12 never gets there because the 12 was already covered by the 17, by the less than 17. So we would actually never see it in that case. So it's important to realize that these end, the elifs end if it's true. So it does its thing and then it gets out. And so then going back to this, if we do at the end of the day, then it's just going to say good evening. So it's important to note, let's do this. Note that elif ends series if true, and note we can have multiple elifs. Elif sections, but notice here if I do else bad day, if I do two else's, it's going to tell me here that's an invalid syntax here on the 19. So it comes in and says you can't have that. You also cannot do an else among the elifs. See, because it's going to blow up on line 17, which it says, oh, okay, you were done. Oh, wait a minute. Because basically this if, once you get to the else, you're going to be tying up, you're going to be ending this if block. So that means this elif doesn't have an if to tie itself at this point. And those are the kinds of things you're going to run into, in particular, because of some of the other logical constraints that we're going to talk about at some point as we're going through this. You almost need the elifs, but you also need to be able to keep in line the logic that you're actually walking through, is realizing that this is a if step 1, else step 2, else step 3, and those, or say check 1, check 2, check 3, where each of those checks, in this case, only is hit if the prior one fails. Once it's true, so here, if it's good morning, it didn't even check any of this stuff, which from a speed point of view is great. That means you could have a really long list, and the only time that the whole list gets walked is when you get down to the last value. So if I did, let's say, if it's less than 1, then if it's less than 2, if it's less than 3, if, all the way down. So I could have a whole bunch of elifs. Then the only one that would execute all of them in this case would be when I get to 24, basically. So if I get less than 24, or just, at some point at the end, I may have 20 something if-elif combinations of, series of commands here, but I'm normally not going to run through them. It's only going to be when I have to run all the way through it. So those are the key points of that. I think what I want to do with this one is I do want to touch on some of the things we're going to be doing next. And we've talked about, because we're going to be sort of building an application out of this. And I don't want to get too deep in, but I do want to talk about, highlight a couple things. Now, one, we've talked about this before, but I want to make sure we understand that we can build strings using our pluses, or we actually can do it with our asterisk as well, because remember, we could do multiples of those. So if I did print a times 5, then it's going to print out, I got to do it with parentheses though. It's going to print out 5A's. So whatever number I do, we can see where it does my 5A's. So we can build strings that way. We also have our formats. So I could say, so the greeting could be good, like that. And then I could have the second part. Let's say the second part is, let's just call it day text. And I'll use a little thing there. So day text could be, we'll start with, we'll just say it's blank. And then here, day text equals morning. It's not going to be quite as clean because of the way we're doing it, but just to show that we can build strings out of this in a formatting, but we can also do them through our pluses and such. And so here, this would be let's do greeting dot format and then give it the day text. And I should spell day text right instead of day next. I can get rid of my multiples of 5s. Let's just comment that out. And so now, there we go. So I get my good morning, or I get my good evening, or whatever it is. So we've been able to walk through these, and we're going to start building out and working on our strings. That'll be part of our ifs. So note that as we're going through this, although I'm trying to build this out so we sort of cover specific items throughout the certification. So you could potentially jump in at any given point. It may be easier to follow this in order because there's going to be things that we may sort of gloss over that we were actually covered in a prior episode in a prior session. So we're going to start working into the logics and loops and things like that. So this is where we're going to continue working on our little application next time around. So I'll leave it like that for now. I think this is a good point to stop just because the next chunk will be a sizable enough chunk. We're going to get into some next one. Actually, we'll probably do vectors and indexing and slicing and length. And so we're going to parse our. We're going to make this a little more than telling them to do a number, and we're going to actually be able to do something like 1235 or something like that. I may even do an AM or PM with it. So that'll be coming next. I just want to wrap this one up. Again, this is stuff that if it's new to you, it will probably become more comfortable as we go on because we're going to we're going to see a lot of repetition. We've already seen ifs and else's before. We're going to see more of this. And a lot of it, as you saw with some of the stuff I was playing around with, the key is always going to be understand where your tabs are, basically what your format is, where your indents are or not, because Python is very indent sensitive. That being said, I'll let you get to it. So go out there, have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time.